Okay, so it is late, we know that. It is 8:32, and we're gonna resume the school committee meeting. For those of you who only watched this portion of the meeting, we were at a joint meeting with the select board and the finance committee, and we just came here to continue our conversation. At least get into some details of the budget, and then we're gonna get into the executive session briefly. Hopefully, we're gonna make it a quick meeting. So, any questions? How did everybody feel about the meeting?
Well, to be honest with you, I was confused about the format of the meeting itself. I thought when we set this meeting up that it was an all committees meeting and we were going to start hashing out the conversation. I didn't realize that it was more about, let's set up a meeting date for when we're gonna hash out and have the conversation. So I was confused.
So, and I'm with you, but looking from the glass half full side, if I may, then we've been trying to have a good conversation for many years now, right? And we always got locked into that. We start with this, and it didn't necessarily get anyone to a good place. I appreciated that there were suggestions, and there was, as you said, Mike, there was an openness to talk about solutions. I appreciated that. Mark opened the way he did. Rob talked about making the pie bigger, short-term, long-term solutions. Bob explained, how Amherst is doing something similar, and they have a plan, and we should have a plan. Glenn mentioned that we should focus on solutions. And I had a side conversation with Steve Shinaki afterwards, and it looks like everybody's looking for that place where we're gonna try to find some solutions to this. When we say, hey, see nothing, say nothing, hear nothing, it's not gonna go anywhere, and we're not doing this as this department versus those departments. So I was a little surprised, and I was hoping that it was going to be all of us sitting around a table and bringing up some of the documents and talking about some more detail. But hopefully we can do that next time. I was at least happy with the suggestions, with some of the openness that may make a better meeting next time.
And I agree with all of that, and it got more hopeful later on in the last third of the conversation. However, the time is ticking now.
The time is ticking, yes.
We are in April 2nd, and this next meeting isn't potentially going to happen until the second or third week of April. That doesn't leave us a whole lot of time to prepare for whatever we decide out of that meeting. So we are essentially losing time. So I agree, the glass half full, we had some, nice dialogue, and the time is ticking.
Yep, and that's a fact, but we can't really do anything about
Can't turn back time.
ticking. What is it?
Can't turn back time. Sorry.
So I do agree that
Sorry, it's
I
late.
thought you were going to sing David Bowie. Yes, Mike.
the only point I wanted to make was I think we need to look at it, as they were saying, from two different perspectives. There's the short term, which, yes, the time is ticking. We're up against that wall. But I was extremely encouraged by what they were talking about to get us in a better position. Maybe not even for next year, but at least start talking about finding solutions for even the year after. At least they were willing to have that dialogue for the longer term.
Yeah.
But to your point, the short term, yes, the time is ticking.
And just not to toot our horns here, but we've been talking about a short-term and a long-term solution for years now.
Right.
About having this conversation about the long-term solution is, what are we gonna do as a town? We need to bring in more revenue. So it's wonderful to hear that finally in this setting, that this dialogue was had. Because it is something that this school committee has been talking about now since I've been on it.
But it wasn't the attitude held by all, I might want to add. There's a couple of detractors,
Yeah.
I thought, but
Well.
it seemed like there was a more open.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting perspective that the original formula that was designed at minimum plus 305, the intent was to protect the schools. I did not even, it didn't ever cross my mind that that would have been the reason why a budget formula like that was ever developed. So I can see why there's a disconnect between us saying it's not enough, it's not helpful, and them going, but it, in their minds thinking that's exactly what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
So I just
Right.
thought I can come to the table, I think, with a different perspective.
And you can actually look at that two ways. Because if 10 years ago, when they passed that to protect the schools, I mean, was the climate so bad 10 years ago that, they had to protect the schools? You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, they had
Yeah.
to make sure that this tax override,
Only
because,
went
Yes, when
to-
the economy went kaputzi. And
so
then
this
the
tells
housing
me
bubble
that
burst. Yeah,
this philosophy has been going on for a really long time.
Yeah.
Of
That's,
the us versus
The
them,
process, yeah.
and
yeah. Based on what I know, I think that's a good point. That was an interesting take on this whole thing, because when we had the enrollment, when we had the school choice at the level that it was, the revolving fund was taking care of a lot of things.
Yes.
Dave, you're nodding because you were part of all those conversations. So, so if we thought that, as you say, the schools needed protection at that time, at a time when we have no longer any one of those revolving funds that can help us, not to have a better conversation around how we can truly protect the schools. That's it's a little interesting.
And I was a little curious about the direction of that particular piece of the conversation when we were asked about whether or not we had contingency funds, because, and again, this could be my cynical side. It almost, to me, the tone was almost accusatory in some way that well, why don't you have a contingency fund? And of course, we all know why we don't have a contingency fund. That dried up a long time ago. So I was a little confused about the direction that was taking and what the implication was, and I wanted to revisit that. But
What was that? I mean, I guess my question is, because that could be taken in a couple of different ways, if I'm not mistaken. Like, no, there was no contingencies built into the budget, but I thought the question was being asked with the respect of, is there money that you're budgeting for that may be contingent upon X happening? And I think that's the way you answered the question too, right?
Well, I think you shared three possible
examples,
contingencies. One of them was already spoken for
Yep.
because the contingency was built based on expectation that there was going to be someone coming in,
Right.
and we found
then-
out that person is coming in.
Yes.
So that's already spoken for. There is a secondary contingency of a small amount. I forgot how much it was. And the third one was our
School lunch.
usual school lunch contingency, which we increased from 10,000 to 16,000, based on the trend, which we don't look to spend, but every year something seems to happen, and we never really get to save that contingency. So they are not true contingencies in the sense that you build
Right.
that contingency year after year to be able to use for all these dramatic changes. And Deanna, what you were saying, it was how Mark explained it. I thought it was nice that when you tell a committee or any entity that you have to spend or you have to plan tightly for what you have, despite the fact that there's always that possibility, strong possibility, things will fluctuate because of the nature of some of those line items. And when that happens, telling them, hey, you're asking over your budget, it's almost setting, in business speak, it's setting people for failure. Just you're tightening it this much, and then that something is likely to happen. Folks, I don't know if it was, I don't know who it was, saying that everybody goes in front of the town meeting and everybody has to. Yes, but think about it. It's double, triple whammy for us many times. This year, we already went in front of the town meeting and we had to defend 3 articles that were mandated. I mean, we could not do anything about that. And you know, my friend here, you know, keeps on saying that, you know, sometimes we have to look at how we're explaining things. Maybe we're not able to explain everything. But this is not the first time that we're having that conversation. Still, we had to debate. We had to explain what those mandates were and that there was no way other than being able to pay. So anyway, there were some changes to the numbers since last time we've seen.
There's one last point
Yes, please
that
do.
I wanted to make about the meeting. Are we done with this before we're saying, or is this all part of?
We're only doing budget today, right? That's only is the single item.
Okay. I just was curious about your thoughts on the roof situation and the, you know, how that piece of the conversation went, because, you know, we haven't really spoken of it publicly, right?
Yeah.
First we heard about it was at the last select board meeting, and we haven't had a discussion as a committee about
No.
it. So I think we need to have that.
Because we didn't see anything formal, and I think Chris
Right.
himself just mentioned that there are currently 2 potential bids that may be pretty far from each other, but you know the total may still be close, you know, to over $1 million. We don't know, and we haven't seen it. So we're having a conversation about something that we haven't seen on the spot. You know, that was the interesting part of it. But eventually, it's going to come up. Did I understand your suggestion correctly? That
Can we just recap for the benefit of the camera that we had put in to the capital planning committee provisions for a new roof, and that
at the high school, yeah.
for the high school,
Yep.
and that was in the amount of how much?
Roughly $1 million. I think
Roughly
it
$1
was-
million
yep.
dollars,
And it was based on the capital plan that covers the last 5 years, and that part of the strategic plan is to create the next capital plan. But when that was presented to the capital as part of our request, they asked for roof quotes because they did not accept the quotes that were included in the capital plan. So then John Sullivan went out, and that's why there are now these new quotes that I think we haven't seen because they've been going through John to.
And so
Chris.
to back it up even further, we had requested the roof repairs in the last maybe 3 years of the capital plan.
Yeah.
And
We put it
we-
together with Judy, I think.
yes,
that was,
correct.
yeah.
I think we initially put it together with Judy, and every year we have put it in our capital plan requests since then. And at the last select board meeting that we attended, Chris Martin made the statement that he was planning on putting on a new roof at the school. But that was literally the first we had heard about it. And so then when we had the meeting tonight, I asked a question about how we were going to be paying for this roof, because it seemed to be paying for it out of 1 year stabilization funds, you know, which could potentially be over $1 million. It's not something that I even would support as a town's member, you know, because, you know, why can't we loan take out a loan for some of that and pay it, you know, over a 10-year period or something, you know, and paying it back over many years through free cash every year. Or some creative way to finance the roof as opposed to taking all that money out of 1 year's stabilization. And is that unreasonable? Is that a reasonable?
So I can again, you know, you may not like the answer, but I can see both sides of that.
I'm just throwing
Because
it out
what
there.
you and that's exactly what I thought you were saying, that can we just borrow the money and then pay for it through free cash during the course of so many years, and the interest that may be part of that borrowing, as opposed to in one setting write the check and be done with it. of course, the argument on the other side is, well, then you can save so much on the interest. For 1 year, you just spend most of your free cash on one project, but next year free cash comes in. You don't have to worry about paying interest or anything like that. I mean, there are both sides to it, and I know that, most of the projects have that clash. How much of it you borrow and how much, you pay in interest. Interest rates may drive some of the conversation too. If they're too high, then you don't really want to incur that much.
So how involved is the school committee on that decision-making process? Is that something that we're not involved in at all?
Well, as of now, none, because we did not, as you said, we did not even know about the quotes, except for one time that I went to the capital improvement committee's meeting. I wasn't aware that things were happening in the background.
So is it reasonable or unreasonable to expect that the school department would be included in that decision-making? Considering, again, just throwing it out there, the budget situation that we're in. I get from a pure financial standpoint why you would, maybe not want to take out a loan because interest and all of that. But you have this other $700,000 budget deficit.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you take other things into consideration? Question A. Question B is, again, is that something a school department would be included in? I mean, do you have any insight into that?
I think it would be part of a capital plan that was inclusive of the other boards, so that it would have the payment of a roof of that amount or any expense of that amount would have been part of a capital plan, and that effective boards would have known about that and would have had a long-term discussion. I think one of the finance board members was talking about the Amherst, and I think Granby, we're not really clear about what percent of our budget should be in stabilization, what percent should be going into free cash,
And why?
And I think those are all questions we're asking now, I think, that are important to be answered so that we have some guidelines around it. Then there is actually money that could be redirected to whatever department is experiencing either increased expenses or declining enrollment, or and it's a more open conversation.
And that's what I'm trying to understand. Is this within our purview or not? Because if it's customary for it to be in our purview, then we need to we're included in this decision-making process. If it's not, then hey, I'll back off and say, fine, you guys figure out how you're going to pay for it. Although that doesn't make sense to me. But if that's what they're going to say, if that's how it's done, then fine, I'll back off. But
I couldn't tell you with certainty, but the way it works, it seems to me, is not that much different than a school building project. You have a capital need, you make your case, and then when it's approved, the way it is funded, we're not financial professionals. The way it is, we're trying to make a case because we're thinking that there is a different way that will allow us to use different funds for different purposes. But we're not really part of any financial conversation because it's not the purview of the school committee. That's my understanding. That's why we were not part of that. But the fact that there were things happening and we did not know anything about it, that's what surprised me. Not that financial decisions may be made. And finally, the town will approve, as you said. I mean, the town meeting will say, yeah, we just, we like spending that much money out of this stabilization fund or free cash or some other way. I don't know if we were ever part of any conversation as to how to fund a capital request. That's basically how they design, and then it goes to the town meeting, and the town meeting says okay or no. It would be, good to know if there's something else
Because that could be problematic.
that we don't have any say in it.
Well, just the way it would come up on the floor of the town meeting could be problematic for us.
Thank you.
I think that's where you're trying to go, right?
That's a big piece of it, and I think I mentioned this to you before. That, I mean, that's a lot of money And here,
'Cause they're gonna
on the
look
one
at-
hand, we're spending this kind of money on a roof, and on the other hand, we have this huge budget deficit.
So somebody's gonna walk out of there saying it's 2 point something million just on the schools this year, what's going on?
What are you doing putting a roof on the high school when you have this? It's a conversation that,
Yeah.
you know will come up. I think we've all lived in this town long enough to know. And you know what? There's a part of me, if I wasn't engaged in all of this, I mean, just from a pure semantic point of view, you can argue that. Like, hello.
So I think they could get what they needed for the roof, but that just makes the budget deficit harder.
Well,
That's
of course.
That's
Yeah.
just my gut feeling there.
Psychologically, you're saying
Yeah.
there's
Yes,
of course.
absolutely.
There is absolutely that impact.
That's why I think, why I'm bringing it up here, because in certainly being transparent and just
Yeah.
talking about this, and also I think it is something that needs to be talked about before this ends up on town floor.
And you said something else, which should not be missed, that we put that in our capital plan 3 years ago. So for 3 years, that amount was not spent.
Mhm.
Could it have been, planned for and just you can put because the amount changed a little bit, but it was in the 900 plus thousand
was.
range, the original quote that we got. So now it's million plus range, still in the grand scheme of things. So could we have planned a little differently? I really would love to focus on that other side. This is the psychological side. Absolutely, it's gonna. I mean, just when you have one town meeting and you talk about $1 million for the roof, and then now we're talking about $600,000 for the schools, and net school spending so much about that. That's gonna be tough.
Well, and I think part of the question is, how much does the school committee ask the questions around the town's commitment to using free cash in totality to pay for capital? In other words, why is the town not making a decision to bond? Because you can bond with State House bonds at 1.7%. Why are they not looking at what other communities are doing in terms of financing debt? Because that doesn't necessarily impact your bond rating or your Moody's rating. But I think those questions can be and should be asked
And
to
that's-
understand, again, what is the perspective? If they now understand that minimum plus 305 is not sufficient, if we've at least gotten there, now maybe is the time, the conversation to have Granby talk about, do we really want to, have all of this money in stabilization and be paying cash for anything, or is it time for us to move forward into some other ways to finance expenses?
Because if you think about it, we're in no different of a financial position this year than we were when we initially made the request for the roof in the first place. Everything is pretty much the same.
Right.
Yeah.
We have pretty much the same amount in stabilization. We have a brand new school. And they're looking to not bond for the balance of that portion of, the balance of the funds needed. So the situation is very similar.
Yeah. That reminded me that I appreciated that Bob asked the question the way he did, which was, so this includes all that stuff that you brought as unanticipated, all this stuff that went up between then and now, all these special ed and everything else, and you are almost asking the same amount that was last year with all the additions. So if they weren't there, we would have been in a different situation. At least there is an understanding that these unexpected circumstances are dramatically affecting
Right.
what we cannot do. Because remember, when we started the conversation, you were saying this year I'm going to have great news for the committee because we're going to start at this level. Then all these things start coming in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those expenses don't go away just because they got voted down
Right.
on town floor.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, they showed up again. Here they are,
Yeah.
added to the bottom line.
Right.
Well, and I think, one of the goals I would have for the school department and the town is to reinvest in the revolving accounts, so that we were using revolving accounts when expenses were fluctuating, so that we would have circuit breaker in arrears, that we would have school choice in arrears, so that we would have the ability to have a fund that allowed us the flexibility to pay for unanticipated expenses. In my mind, that's good fiscal planning,
And
and
we-
it's prudent,
We used to be
and
like
we used
that.
to have that.
And I don't
Right.
think, I'm not so sure that everybody understands that that was the case years ago. And the only reason why we don't, well, many reasons, but it's because of, you know, the budget, foundation budget isn't enough, state cuts, federal cuts, every, you know, on and on and on. Losing school choice kids, all of that. But it, you know, it was that canary in the coal mine,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Well, if you listen, you know, Hadley's having the same conversation. Are we going to move school choice money to balance the operating budget of the schools, or are we going to look at revenue from the town to fill that gap? So we're in the coal mine.
Yeah.
People are kind of on the edge of the coal mine.
Our canary
but
has already passed.
But they're having those discussions. If you read the articles, you know, it's a very difficult position to be in.
Yeah, Hadley.
Oh, I do say, I thought that was a fantastic way you segued into showing the surrounding communities, because in the end, that's where our students are choicing out to, so we, at some level, at some point, have to start looking at what they're spending versus what we're not spending, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there is an interesting. There are a lot of things that we really have to be a little more forceful about in terms of how we explain them. Looks like, you know, and I'm included in that. Just, you know, making assumptions that people understand what we're saying, and even the fact that, you know, free cash, something that we've been talking about for so long, the first thing that comes out of most people's mouth is free cash is not free.
Yeah.
You know, which is not really, you know, an economic or financial explanation of what it is and what is not. But, you know, all these things, the stabilization fund, I think that's where Bob was going, at least to an extent, that when you look at, you know, what level they're trying to maintain is similar to ours, or, you know, their free cash. When you look at the towns around us, and you realize that those are the towns many people may want to go to, and we're trying to really get to a point where we say, you know what, there's no reason whatsoever you need to go there, right? I mean, we made all these arguments, and you shared a lot of great things there, and I shared with you the flags of the colleges our kids are accepted to, and I mentioned to some of you, hey, just take that, compare it to any other school around here. And all that is done with whatever we have. But you can only do so much with whatever you have. You have to really build around what you have so that, you know, you can get to the place where you don't have to worry about the, you know, 500,000, 600,000, because that becomes part of your budget because you're attracting so many people. I'm not sure that even we allow ourselves to enjoy things that, you know, make some of us very happy. I was so happy this morning when we were talking that you said, well, there's no change there, and you gave me a number, and that number was 8 more than what in October DESE recorded. So we have 8 more students between October and January that came to West Street School alone.
So I was gonna say, there was a second grader that Isaac got introduced to a new friend sometime in the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I had someone on my street today. They were driving around. They're looking for houses to buy, and they were just scoping out Granby. They drove an hour from out near Worcester to move out west. So
Yep.
people aren't scoping it. You know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interest.
I mean, I can't. I wasn't born here. I wasn't raised here. But I took pride of saying that I was living in this small town called Granby, and, you know, there are a lot of great things in Granby, great people, great schools, great you know, communities. You know, whether they are, you know, churches or the clubs or whatever. We're not comparing ourselves to Boston.
Right.
We're comparing,
Wellesley.
right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, as I say in my line of business, continuous improvement is not about how you grow compared to somebody else. That is irrelevant. Continuous improvement is about how you grow yourself, how you actually look at yourself today and tomorrow and see how much you improved. We have to start thinking that way, and I don't know that we're getting there. But anyway, just I think we have to get into some of these things and maybe take a little, poetic license to explain a little more around the financial stuff.
Yep.
Because the free cash is an important concept. Being able to explain stabilization funds is an important thing for everyone, not just for the schools. We have obviously, another reason why we would like to make it clear. The fact that some towns are spending so much over their net school spending, there's a reason for that. There's a reason why the state now is saying that however we funded you guys starting in 1993 was wrong. It was almost wrong the first 3 years we realized that it was wrong, right? I was having a conversation with a gentleman who's running for some office, and I was explaining to him that that has to be a priority. Anything that says, well, you're going to be funded through your property taxes. Everything that just your property tax will fund that. And then you realize that, well, you can only have so many pieces of property that will support it. And then they look at the income level. When you look at Granby and some towns around us, the income level looks high because you have a mixture of people, relatively, speaking. Mm-hmm. But, people live here doesn't mean that we have people working in this town. So that money doesn't stay here. Mm-hmm. That money is somewhere else.
Right.
So anyway, we have to explain all
bedroom
these
community.
things. We are a bedroom
So
community in a
that's
way.
part of the conversation we at least touched on tonight, that we cannot sustain our services because of the fact that we are a bedroom community, and
Yeah.
we're not bringing enough revenue into the town.
So some of the things, and I'm going to throw that. That's going to be the last thing that I say tonight. I, as much as I was encouraged about some of the nice suggestions that were thrown or mentioned tonight, and we should absolutely follow up on many of those, we also should look at how we can get creative. I don't think we had a lot of opportunities to have those conversations. Looking at some of the line items, whether or not that's the most effective, most efficient way of using
Yep.
some of those services. Transportation conversation that I had with you.
Yep.
Understanding how many students are. You told me, for elementary, it's critical.
Yep.
Let's look at, how we're using. You told me, there are multiple runs. It doesn't necessarily save that much money if you eliminate some runs. But still, is there a way to use those funds elsewhere?
Sure.
So how do we get creative around some of those
Yeah,
things?
and we didn't put in the presentation some of the creative things we've done to get to where we are in the superintendent budget. I think to go back and reestablish what some of those creative things are, like the same staffing schedule, what did that actually result in, and who's teaching where, and we did have effective staffing reductions last year, mostly with the exception of one, mostly through attrition, resignation, or retirement.
Right.
We won't encounter attrition and retirement again for a few years, but it is something to keep our eye on. Can we be flexible as we approach those years? And again, it'll depend on enrollment and where our children are coming and.
Plus, I think, like, isn't there, like, I know there is, because there is in the jobs that I've worked in, there's a cost to turnover.
Yes, very much so.
It's not
Learning
just
curve.
free that, there's training costs, there's materials, there's a whole slew of
Yeah.
Yes.
things that have to get factored in, so
Yep.
Yep.
that's something that always gets lost.
Yeah, the whole department slows down sometimes.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to touch on one more thing. Because everybody says, well, we're not Belchertown, we're not South Hadley. I get that, we're not, right? But I thought, like I said, I thought you segued into that whole thing very well. And I think the closing argument when somebody brings up on something like that is, well, that's why they're asking for, or that's why they're getting 14.4 and we're only asking for 9.5, because we're not.
Right,
So,
right,
Yeah.
right,
We can do more.
right.
I think that connection, I mean, I understand it because we
You
live it.
it.
But I think that connection needs to be made pretty clearly at the next meeting, because I know where you were going with that, but of course the conversation segued, somewhere else. We have a lot of dangling threads in conversation. Have you noticed that? We start conversations, we don't and they lead us somewhere else, and then we don't finish the original conversation, so then there's a dangling thread, and it's like everywhere you look. But I think that point needs to really be made at the next meeting. The point that you were trying to make. So we could have a robust discussion on that, because that's really the crux of our argument. We're not asking for 30%.
Right.
Um,
And I don't want it to go I don't want it to go missed. We send our children to Pathfinder. I'm happy to send our children to Pathfinder and into a vocational program, but nobody questions that Pathfinder is 24.4% over minimum net school spending. So yes, we don't want to compare ourselves, but I think we need to be realistic. And I hope that tonight what I heard was that there is an understanding now that the budget formula is not sufficient. And that's clear, because I did not hear that last year. I heard it's what you got, live in your box, you need to do better with less, you're inefficient, and, the implications around you're just not managing your budget well. I didn't hear that tonight, and I'm excited about that, because I think it allows us to go back in, look for even more efficiencies if we know there's going to be some more support coming out of the municipal budget side, so that we can say, okay, if we can get this, and we get this from you, and we get more enrollment, then together the whole thing can start to turn and be sustainable. Because I've said it before, we're the canary in the coal mine, and we have a very insufficient process and product in terms of what we get from the budget. So,
and I think Selectman Sexton really brought that back
Yeah.
to where the conversation really needed to be directed. And he was spot on in
Yeah.
saying that we need to stop talking about problems, and we need to start talking about solutions as a town.
Yep.
Which is something that, again, this committee has been talking about
Yeah.
for years. Because we know where we're at. We know the
We're
problems
very
we
well
have.
aware.
Yeah.
And we cannot figure our way out of it under the current circumstances and the current financial constraints that we have.
I would like to repeat one thing for everyone again. We have more students in the schools than we had at the beginning of the school year. If we have to build it around something, there is a reason why folks are trying to come to Granby. It could be the new building. It could be the town. It could be a combination. But there are reasons why still people want to be in Granby. And it is our job to make sure that those folks who would like to be in Granby come to Granby. How do we? And that's why I like Rob's idea. Let's just have this committee to talk about how we can do that. How we can grow that pie. So,
And the idea that, somehow let's make K through 6 the greatest school, and then close the high school, or think of some other way without the junior senior high school. It doesn't make any sense to me, because let's say that your kids are in 3rd grade and 5th grade. Not everybody is going to be at the pre-K level when they move into Granby, right?
Right.
These kids are going to be all different ages. So the idea of, let's move to Granby for a couple of years, and then when they go to high school, we'll send them somewhere else, and maybe we'll move somewhere else, or change schools again.
Or
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't.
or drop off one in South Hadley and run back here to drop the other one off.
Yeah.
Crazy. Who would do that? I
There
mean,
might be a small portion of people that we're talking about that might be coming in, you know, before they have kids, or kids that are really, really young, that to take advantage of the, you know, K through 6 brand new school. But
It's only brand new for
that's
so
not
long.
everybody.
So that actually that is one of those things, maybe more importantly than the other stuff, the financial stuff, we have to explain. And you tried this very hard last year when you presented the regionalization stuff. That maybe there's still an impression that if all the students go to some other schools, we don't have to really deal with anything. Massachusetts law says that school-age children who live in a town are the responsibility of that town in terms of their education. So let's start with that, and we should repeat that over and over again. They are our responsibility regardless of where they are. We're going to have to pay for their education. We may just close down the building and maybe, just save some money. When folks say, as you said, hey, don't compare us to other districts, we have nothing to do with them. Well, these kids will have to go somewhere, which is the neighboring towns. Look at the per pupil expenditure in those towns compared to what we're spending, what we are able to do with the much smaller amount that we're spending per pupil. And the town now will have to spend that amount to be able to send our students, our kids, to other districts. And if the numbers work that way, chances are we're going to end up paying more when we regionalize than trying to make our own district work.
Transportation goes
And I
way
think
up.
I think that's another piece of math
We won't
that
even fit.
would be helpful for FinCom and Select Board. That idea of the per pupils expenditure, because we're one of the lower per pupil I have a hard time with that. That's a tough chain of words in the area, right? So chances are we're starting with that base amount, and then we're adding on to wherever we send them. And if we could put, just some figures to that somehow, as
Yeah.
far as showing the per pupil expenditure in, surrounding areas. I'm not going to say that
Yeah.
anymore.
It's not a linear one-on-one thing. I mean, there are they weigh it based on number of students and this and that. But still, because the discrepancy is so big in those amounts that we're going to end up paying more.
Yep.
At least
it's a
under
real
current
figure.
circumstances. Yeah.
Plus, there's a pretty good chance that wherever they go, they'd have to add on a whole
Busing.
wing to a school, which would drive
Yeah,
that
so
per
now we're
pupil cost.
paying
Yeah.
for a
Up,
building
right.
in another town?
Yeah, plus
Yeah,
we're
Gravy
busing them
taxpayers will
there.
love that.
You think we pay high transportation costs now?
Oh,
Wait
through
till
the
you're
roof.
busing them somewhere else.
Yeah.
The last question I had was based off of your comment. What is a normal, or what is an average percentage of students moving into a community from, say, June 1st, from one year to the next? Because it seems to me that we have to be close to like 15%.
Sure. I think you're referring to attrition rates.
For new
Students that
yeah.
move in.
Yeah, like we had
Yep.
the 8 second graders, which is
Yeah.
now probably higher than that, plus all the other
Right.
grades. Like,
I don't know if there's a normal rate, but I can certainly do some querying out of the data for different towns to see what their rates are.
I'm just curious if we
Yep.
can throw that out to help build a picture
Mhm.
that what you're doing here is really working, because people are moving, especially if it's higher, right?
Yeah.
So we asked the same question at that meeting. What are our next steps? What are we doing? First of all, we should check our calendars probably and
Yeah.
see. Or would you like to doodle? Is it better?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, either
There's
way, I'm
4 of us
fine.
here, so.
All right. So, well, there's only 4 of us.
Yeah, there's only 4 of us.
Okay, so I misspoke. There's 4 of us here. We're all here. Kathy? So I have several meetings on my calendar that say hold for the public hearing. The public hearing is the 12th?
I believe so.
Did we post for it already?
Yes.
I've got,
Oh, April 12th?
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm in DC.
here.
It can't be the 12th. Not April 12th.
Did we advertise?
Because-
April 12th is the
Chris
public
Mar-
hearing.
So we already advertised in the paper?
Yes,
Oy.
I was told to.
I'm at,
So, so you can't, we can't have this next all committees meeting after the public hearing.
I wouldn't think so.
It has to
No.
be before.
yeah.
Well, you have a school committee meeting next Monday also
Right.
scheduled.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily leave us much room to react to anything that comes out of it either.
No, it doesn't.
What if we were to schedule 2 joint meetings and say one is for the short term, so we can have a outcome, and then a second for the longer term
Oh, that's a good idea.
conversation? Because I think, at the very least, there needs to be a collective understanding about what we're going to town meeting floor with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, April 12th is it? It is, I guess. I have a feeling that I have something. On
I
that
know, I'm
day.
not here. I'm gonna be in DC at a training. From the 11th to the 15th.
I don't know if that's acceptable, Jen. So
Skype.
Yeah.
Skype you in, you know.
Skype me in, that's
Yeah.
perfect.
The 12th doesn't, I've already changed this event twice because of school committee stuff. And I have something on the 12th too.
right. Looks like I'm fine. But you know, if we don't have 2 members, we don't have a quorum.
Do you need one for that? For the 12th?
For a public hearing,
For just the hearing, right? There's no votes.
there is none.
Right.
I mean, it's the superintendent's
Right.
presentation, then what we say, and then the public lets us know.
Right.
And if you guys want to watch it on TV, Alex is gonna film it anyway, right?
Is this gonna be a live event?
It will be.
'Cause
It
I'd
will be
like
like
them to, at least have the 2-minute edit, right?
Yeah. Just in case.
Just in case.
yeah, we're no good with
Me
5
and Deanna
seconds,
will be
right?
there, you should be
yeah,
okay.
2-minute edit. Yeah.
But more importantly, we need to meet before this
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't give us much time. And Jen is not here on the 11th, so the 11th is out.
Yeah. How about the
Yeah.
9th? Are you here?
Yep.
Either 9th or 10th, I guess.
But the 9th is
Our
our
meeting.
school committee meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I can do
could
the
we
10th.
could we do the 9th and the 10th? So the 10th could be the school committee. We could have the joint meeting first, and then the 10th to make any changes based on.
I'll
For the
make any
public
one of
hearing.
those options work that is convenient for everybody else.
I can do that.
Yeah, I can make the 9th and 10th work.
Yep. I can do.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna
The-
post 2
the
meetings.
The 10th, I can tell you right now that,
7.
oh, wait a minute. No, I might be able to make it for 6:30. I have my appointment book in my mind right now. I think I might be okay for 6:30 on the 10th.
You said invites.
Okay.
So what are we doing now?
School committee meeting, an additional school committee meeting on the 10th, and then find out if, send Chris a request for the joint meeting on the 9th.
And if it doesn't work, we can have the
reverse
10th.
it.
Yeah.
So.
9th or 10th.
9th
Yeah.
or 10th, ask Chris for a 9th or 10th.
And actually, I think we need to, can we say in there, that we need to meet before the public hearing on the 12th? So, well, I think we need to emphasize that.
Yeah.
Do we have any other dates that we can throw in there? Anything, what about this
Let's
week?
do Thursday, Friday, Wednesday.
This week.
I don't know, Thursday I'm doing my superintendent TV. I might be a little.
Oh.
Kidding.
Fame.
Really, I'm just kidding. I can do Thursday.
Okay.
I can do anything.
And if you want to throw the 5th, I can do that.
Yeah, I can make it work too.
Did you get that, Kathy?
No, I was ready to do.
Add the 5th to that request for Chris? Although, wait, can we get it posted in time?
No.
No,
Except
that'd be 3 days.
Tomorrow. You can.
If he gets back to me tomorrow.
Right.
Right.
Oh.
Well,
And will he get back to you tomorrow? How does that normally
that might be
work?
tough because he's got to get the select board.
Yeah,
and
he has
the-
to get the finance
Yeah.
committee and the
Yeah,
select
he's
board.
got it.
Well, we can throw it out there.
Yeah, let's just throw it as an
Yeah,
option.
just- and I would say we're available, but we recognize that posting may be a challenge. And that we're available on the 9th and the
Yeah.
10th.
9th and 10th. 5th is an option.
You're out on the
but-
11th?
Yeah, my flight's at 5:30.
Okay.
So, just so I don't have a snafu like I did recently, 9th, 10th, 12th
Yes.
of next week.
Yep.
Well, yeah, right.
Possibly, right, but I've
Possibly,
got
yeah.
them on the,
Yeah.
okay.
Bring your sleeping bag. All right, so that's good.
I did put a blanket and pillow in my closet.
Be like
That's
a little
pretty
Harry
bad.
Potter
It is.
cupboard.
My yoga mat.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. The actuals.
Yes. I did not put them in the shared folder
So will we be able to see those? Okay.
at the next, yes.
Can we see it before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And do they have
So,
copies?
Mark is in tomorrow, so I know that there were some questions. I had a question on the actuals because they didn't, at the time, include 19,
9.
FY19, the budget. So it was historical. He did a historical 14 to 18,
Okay.
and I thought it would be important to have 19 on there, so he's going back to add 19.
So I would say we don't need 14, 15.
Okay,
We need 16, 17 with budget and actuals.
yep,
And then we need 18, which is
Budget.
the
yep,
current budget, and then the projection for
Yes.
next year, the next
Yes.
year's budget.
Yep.
That's how the town departments are
Ex-
sharing theirs.
yes.
So we would be aligned with that. But it
Mhm.
would be also good to see if you want. I mean, if we already have the actuals for 12, 15, 14 and 15, it would be good to see what the trends are and what
Mhm.
changed, what did not change. But I think for our conversation, we don't need that
No,
far back.
I think that might be too complicated
Well, we had
too.
that conversation about some other data going back to like 93 and
Right.
so, yeah.
Yeah, no. I
Yep.
thought that's what we agreed to anyway, right?
Yes.
Was-
Yep.
Okay.
So my hope is, working with Mark tomorrow to get, the FY actuals. And also, we had talked about the one-page, information sheet for budget hearing, for the public hearing, so I
Yeah.
wanted to get that, to you as well.
So if the 12 is it, I'm going to post it on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
on the school committee page that we have the public hearing, because some folks were sending messages and asking, is this the meeting where we get to talk? And that's what Mark was talking about too at the beginning, that
Yeah.
no, this is a committee meeting,
Mhm.
you can talk at the public hearing. So okay, so some folks are looking forward to that, so we can inform them. Anything else? All right. Okay, so thank you. It was an interesting evening.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Part A3, to discuss strategy with regard to collective bargaining, as doing so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session. Can we have a roll call, please?
Deanne Payne Rakowski, aye.
Jennifer Curran, aye.
Emery Ervin, aye.
Mike Simpson, aye.
Thank you. Have a good evening.